Okay, bio, this is Unit 7, Segment 2, Punnett Squares, Probability, and Complete Dominance. Probability is defined as the likelihood that a particular event is going to occur. So what is the likelihood that I'm going to give a recessive allele to my offspring or a dominant allele? So probabilities in genetics are pretty important. It's your ability to predict the outcome. What are all the possible outcomes that could happen? And knowing that you get one allele from your dad and one from your biological mom, you have always two options to give, okay? And sometimes those two options can be both dominant or both recessive, or one dominant, one recessive, and so then there's going to be different outcomes. So anyway, when you flip a coin, the odds of you getting a heads on that coin flip is 1 over 2, because it's one of the options, but there are two total options that could show up. So the 1 is over the 2. The 2 is showing you how many total options there are. So it's 1/2, or sometimes written 1:2. And then percentage-wise, that's 50%. So we're going to be looking at a lot of because we're going to be making something called Punnett Squares. There are 4 squares in there, so you're going to be seeing a lot of 25%, 75%, 50%. So they're easier numbers to deal with, or 1/2, or 1/4, or something like that. So our ratios in this class are not going to be too difficult to try to work out. So what is a Punnett Square? We are going to make so many of these, you guys. So it's very, very critical for this segment and for next segment and for the unit test to be able to write a Punnett Square. And it's basically a diagram that helps us make predictions. What is the probability of the offspring having a certain genotype, okay? So for a genetic cross, we call that. So we take the parent, the two parents' alleles, genotype, and we put them into this chart, okay, right here, and it allows us to say, well, okay, if this parent has one dominant gene and one recessive gene, it allows us to see, okay, well, what if the parent gave this dominant gene? What if the parent gave instead their recessive gene to the offspring? So it allows us to make those predictions. But you need to know P generation. P generation is a term, and it is talking about the parents. And then the offspring of the parents are called the F1 generation. The offspring of the F1 generation is called the F2 generation, and it would move on from that, but we will not go further than F2. In fact, most of the time we will not go further than F1. So P is the starting parent generation. F1, it actually stands for filial, but F1 is the offspring to the parent generation, and F2 is the offspring to the F1. All about offspring. So here's an example, and I suggest putting this in your notes, and we will be making these like crazy. But I have 2 examples for you. So Punnett Square example number 1. With this situation, the P generation, the parent generations that are crossing, have these genotypes. So one parent, the father, has a dominant and a recessive allele for a particular trait. The mother has 2 recessive alleles for a given trait, and we're going to cross them. What are the odds that they're going to have a child, an offspring, that is showing the dominant trait? What is the probability that they're going to have an offspring that is showing the recessive trait? It's all about probabilities. So in order to do this, we have to set up our square. Okay, so you're just going to get good at setting up a square and cutting it in half with the 2 inner lines. And then one allele of the fathers will go over here, the other allele will go over here. And almost always we write the dominant one first. And you can see that written in the genotype. The dominant one is written first. I would like you guys to get in that habit. And then the mom only has 2 recessive, so we'll put one of them here and one of them here. Now, how this works is you drag the B down in this column, and you write it here, and you write it here, okay? The big B is written down. And then this little b is also written down. So you can see that this little b is put right here and put right here. This mother's little b is going to be dragged over. So we put her little b with his big B right here. That's one combination that can happen for an offspring. This little b is here and her little b is over here. This is one combination that an offspring can have. If father gives his big B, we write it here, and mother gives this little b, you're going to end up with this combination. If father gives this little b and mother gives this little b, you end up with this one. So overall, the F1 generation probabilities will be written out over here. And I did go ahead and assign the letters to mean a trait. So the phenotype of a dominant would be the ability to roll the tongue, and the phenotype of the recessive is not being able to roll your tongue. So what's the probabilities for the F1 generation, which is the offspring of the parent generation? You write it, when you write the probabilities, you write it in genotype and phenotype probabilities. So in this case, half of the boxes contain big B, little b. So that's 50%. There's a 50% chance that a cross between this father and this mother will produce a child that can roll their tongue. Okay, there's a 50% chance. And then here, there's a 50% chance that they will have a child that has no tongue, not able to roll their tongue, and has a genotype little b, little b. So when you guys, it's a lot of work to write, because when you do this, you have to write down both the genotype and the phenotype. Remember, genotype is the genes, the letters, the alleles. And phenotype is the physical attribute, what is being shown, the physical trait that you see, okay? And then here's another one. So in this case, we have the P generation is heterozygous, so it has one dominant and one recessive. Both mom and dad have the same heterozygous genotype. So we are going to cross them, okay? It doesn't matter which one you put on the top or which one you put along the side, but you're going to write them both. So we'll just say this is dad, this is mom's. If dad happens to give his big allele, the dominant allele, and mom also gives her dominant allele, then that will transfer into this genotype. If dad instead gives his recessive allele and mom gives her dominant allele, you end up with a genotype like this for the offspring. And then this dominant A will be dragged down, and this lowercase a will be dragged over, and you end up with a dominant and a recessive here. And then here, in this case, dad could give his recessive, and so could mom, and then this could end up with the offspring. So this is the breakdown of the F1 generation probabilities. And we're going to say that these alleles stand for the dominant is having a widow's peak, recessive is having no widow's peak. So here in the genotype, 25, 1/4 of the boxes, there's a 25% chance that the offspring will be capital A for genotype, because there's only one out of the 4 boxes that has that. And then there's a 50% chance, or 1:2 ratio, that the genotype of the offspring will be capital A and lowercase a, so will be heterozygous. There's a 25% that it will be homozygous recessive, lowercase a, lowercase a. Now with phenotypes, guys, both of these genotypes right here will show the dominant trait. With complete dominance, you will show the dominant will mask any recessive that is available. So right here, there's a dominant that's there, and so that will show 75% will show a widow's peak, because it will add these two together. Phenotypes is what it's showing. So this 50% will show widow's peak, and this 25% will show widow's peak. That means that there's a 75% chance that the offspring from this father and this mother will show a widow's peak. There's a 25% chance that the recessive trait will be shown. If 2 heterozygous parents cross, this is the breakdown of the percentages. Okay, we're going to do a lot of these. What you just learned, what you've been learning is called complete dominance. One allele will completely, and I realize that is spelled wrong, but is completely dominant over the other. The recessive is only shown if the dominant allele is not present. So if in this example, tall is dominant over short, a genotype with this, saying this, is going to elicit a tall phenotype. A genotype that is heterozygous is going to also be tall, okay? Because this dominant allele will mask this recessive. So they're what we call a carrier of the recessive. They're carrying this recessive allele, but they're not showing it. The dominant will mask that, and it will be tall. The person will be tall. And then little t will be the homozygous recessive genotype, and it will have a phenotype of being short. This is an example of complete dominance. That's what we've learned so far, and what we will only learn in this segment. Our next segment, we're going to throw some curveballs at you. But right now, we're just talking about complete dominance. When there's a dominant allele, it will mask the recessive one. And then this is the last slide. 2 more vocab words. Mono hybrid cross. Mono means one. So we're looking at one cross. So that means we're only looking at one trait. The 2 Punnett squares that you guys learned in these notes were monohybrid crosses. We only looked at mother crossed with father, okay? We only looked at the two alleles representing the genotype for each mother and father. Now with a dihybrid cross, di means 2, this is where we're looking at one trait and another locked together. And this Punnett square is massive because we will not be practicing any of these in class. And it can get really big and messy, but you can look at 2 traits at a time and how that will carry out all the possibilities for the offspring. But you just need to know what this means, but we will not be actually doing any of them. Monohybrid is all that we're going to be doing for Punnett squares. Okay, 4 boxes, Punnett square, monohybrid. And I think that's it.